Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have this returning guest. Jeff Clark is the Senior Precious Metals Analyst at Gold Silver. He's here with us again on Reluctant Preppers to talk to us about what has been going on and what is false flags that we've been told about in the past about the silver market and what we can look forward to going forward. Jeff, thanks for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers.
It's great to be back with you, Dunnigan.
I want to mention to everybody today is Tuesday, February 26, 2019, and a lot of the principles we're going to be talking about are not dependent on that, but we'll get into it right away. You've written some articles recently that were quite eye-catching. One of them is about the past, and it says the 3 flaws why the Hunt brothers were not the primary reason for the silver's 1970s spike into the 1980s. We have a lot of cultural knowledge on people's part thinking that the run-up in silver prices that got everybody's attention back around 1980, and I remember it vividly from my junior high years and high school years. Actually, it was high school. In the newspaper every day, they were showing ads of, we'll pay you 10 times face value for your silver coins. Now we'll pay you 16 times face value, 18 times, 20 times face value for your silver coins.
Wow. It
was full-page ads in the newspaper where we lived. But you say that a lot of that spectacular run-up that silver did to the 1980s high was blamed on the attempt to corner the market by the Hunt brothers was in fact happening because of other forces. Can you kind of unwind that misnomer and help us understand what those market forces were, and maybe that'll give us some insight into what lies ahead in our own lives?
Yeah, this is a good question, because if silver rose only because of the Hunt brothers, then hey, maybe we all need to rethink our belief that silver is going to skyrocket again someday. And this all came up because I had a friend at a conference I was attending, and he said, I don't buy silver, I only buy gold. And I said, really? Why is that? He goes, well, the only reason silver rose in 1980 was because the Hunt brothers were trying to corner it. So, the Hunt brothers are long gone, so I'm not going to buy that because that was the primary catalyst at the time. I said, well, I don't know about that, So anyway, I went back and did some research. This really triggered some things in me to go and do some research. And there were 3 basic flaws with that kind of thinking that I came up with. The first is what I don't think you see in a lot of these mainstream, and they are mostly mainstream reports that blame it on the Hunt brothers, right? So what a lot of them don't report is that almost everything was rising at the time. It wasn't just silver. Gold rose, platinum rose, palladium rose, oil rose. All these other assets were rising as well. And so I did a correlation coefficient between gold and silver, because if the Hunt brothers were cornering silver and not gold, they shouldn't rise together very much.
Right.
So I did a correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient between gold and silver from January 1st, 79 till April 1st of 1980, that really big run-up in the metals, was 99.2%. So gold and silver rose or fell together 99.2% of the time during that 15-month period. There was like maybe 3 days of that entire 15-month period, gold and silver didn't rise together. So if the Hunts were cornering silver, why did gold rise virtually in lockstep with it? Why did platinum rise? Why did palladium rise? Why did oil rise? Why did a lot of other commodities rise? Well, the answer is kind of obvious, because it wasn't just the Hunt brothers that were, trying to corner the market. It was inflation, it was interest rates, it was economic problem, it was recession, it was Russia invading Afghanistan. It was a whole slew of things that contributed to silver's rise. So the Hunt brothers did participate in that, and they contributed to it, but they were clearly not the sole rise. And another thing these guys don't report is Bunker Hunt actually visited the COMEX in April of 1974. And when he walked onto the trading floor, a lot of these traders literally came to a screeching halt. You know, in the movies how they portray the trading pits where they're screaming and throwing things and making signals and all that. That all came to a screeching halt. It got silent because they all wanted to see who this crazy Texan was that was trying to corner, was buying up all these, ounces of silver. They wanted to see who he was. Well, the rumors were already floating out there that he was trying to do this. The Hunt brothers were trying to do this with silver. And of course, once he left, the rumors just even went crazier that this guy's buying up all this silver. Here's who he is. We met him. We saw him. Well, you think the silver price would rise in response to that, right? No. The silver price for the next 18 months went nowhere. In fact, it fell by as much as 20% after he visited the COMEX. So if they're trying to, assign the Hunt brothers as the primary catalyst, silver should have spiked then when he visited and the rumors were flying around. It didn't. It went nowhere. It fell. So I think that's one of the big factors as to why I don't believe that the Hunt brothers are the primary catalyst. The other thing is in 2011, remember what silver did then? It had another big, huge spike. The price went up something like 450% from its 2008 low to its 2011 high. Well, the Hunt brothers are long gone. There's no Hunt brothers. Where were they? Why did silver rise if it was all the Hunt brothers? Well, that was a pretty big spike. If you look at on a chart, just 2.5 years, 450%. Obviously, silver was responding to other factors. So, and the last flaw is that what almost any of these reports you'll see on about the Hunt brothers, what none of them will tell you is that what if we have another Hunt brothers? What if there's another entity out there that comes along in the next bull market for precious metals and wants to buy up a lot of the metal? And that is actually a very likely possibility because the silver market is just so darn small. Let me give you one example. I'm sorry if I'm going on too long.
No, you're doing fine. Thanks.
I want to give you this one example. So I spoke up in Vancouver on silver. It was called the Silver Slamorama. People can look it up on YouTube if they want. But I gave just tons of examples of just how small silver is. Here's one of them. Apple Computer had something like $2.5 billion, I think, in cash in their quarterly report of Q3 of last year. $2.5 billion. So they could buy with their cash every investment ounce of gold and silver, coins, bars, ETFs, any investment ounce of silver. They could buy the entire investment of silver from 2017 with 0.5% of their cash. It's a rounding error. It wouldn't even dent their cash balance at all. And they could have bought in every single ounce of silver that was used toward investment in the year 2017. And there's tons of examples like this. That shows you just how small this market is. And what I think is some investors are going to figure this out. And I think we see another Hunt brothers or 10, come along in the next bull market because it'll be easy for them to do so. And of course, the market is so small that any little bit of money coming into that market is just really going to blow up the price. So I think that's what's going to happen, and I'm personally betting on it. So,
well, that's quite enlightening, and it really does anchor me back to my first years of my life where, actually, no, it wasn't. It was the second time I really became impressed with silver as something special. And the first one was actually years earlier when my dad and my brother sat me down at the kitchen table and showed me the common coin collection that they had started together. And my brother taught me how to tell the difference between two different ways to tell the difference between true silver coins and the new fake sandwich coins that were coming out, and both by the sound, the ringing sound that they make when you spin them on the table, and that lovely sound of the silver versus the flat, stupid sound of the stainless steel sandwich coins, and then also, of course, the copper stripe on the side when you look at them from the side that we've all gotten used to seeing. But this discussion about the 70s into the 80s, and then, of course, the peak in the 2011, after which I became awakened again to the risks in the economy. Do you buy into the idea that when what looks like a run-up in precious metals, gold and silver prices, is really a run-down in the value of the dollar, it's really that the dollar at that moment is hyperinflating against real assets like like these that you've been mentioning?
That's a common point, and I'm not going to tell you it's inaccurate. It is accurate. Gold and silver are priced in dollars, so it is the anti-dollar, if you will. What I like to point out in this discussion, though, is it's not just a dollar issue. Gold and silver have been crisis hedges. They've been money. They've been stores of value for literally thousands of years, right? So what if the dollar goes nowhere or it even rises? Does that mean gold and silver can't do well? Well, absolutely not. It can do well if there is some type of crisis or reason for people to flee to what is real money, gold and silver I include in that, not just gold. So I think it's more of a crisis or hedge issue as opposed to just, watch the dollar. The dollar is a critical component of that. Again, I'm saying it's actually bigger than just a dollar issue. It's actually a crisis issue.
Okay, makes sense. Now, in the last part of your Hunt Brothers or Not story, you mentioned that you said maybe there'll be 10 such Hunt Brothers coming up in the next opportunity to run up the price of precious metals. And it's interesting, you wrote another article recently talking about the U.S. Mint being sold out of Silver Eagles. And we've had this happen in the past. Like there has been some December, January's when there's been a lot of demand in some years recently. But you did a rather careful analysis of the buying patterns and the volume patterns and how it's affected availability of silver bullion coins in the U.S. over the last several years. Could you enlighten us what's going on now with the availability of Silver Eagles and what that might tell us about the road ahead?
Yes. So the U.S. Mint did announce last week, February 21st, that they are out of 2019 1-ounce Silver Eagles. You can't buy them anymore. They're also, by the way, out of 2018. There are no more to buy. The only way you can buy these is if a dealer happened to have them in stock and they didn't sell out of them yet. So the Mint is not shipping any more 2018 and is currently not shipping any 2019 Silver Eagles. And this is unusual. And the reason I wrote about it isn't because they were out. It was the timing of this suspension, if you will. If you remember, they were out in August of last year, just 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. They were out. And now they're out here in February. Well, when the U.S. Mint has outages, they're usually in Q4 of the year. They're the last quarter of the year. And the reason is because they ramp down production of that year's coin and they start to gear up for next year's coin. So that's not all that uncommon. But in these instances, they ran out in August and now they're running out here in February. So the natural question you have to ask is, okay, well, was this because of, a big spike in demand? Well, 2017 was one of the worst years for demand for physical product that we've had on record since the bull market started back in 2001. Mm-hmm. And this year, yes, demand is up a little bit, but nowhere near, peak levels. It's like a third of what it was in 2015. So the point is that, what's going on here? Why are they running out now at this unusual time when demand is up, but it's certainly not at any spiky kind of runaway level.
Yeah.
So that's the concern. The Mint is running out at times they should not be running out, and so you have to turn to other things to buy. And the worst part of all this is that because the supply-demand thing is out of whack for Silver Eagles, it's forced premiums on Silver Eagles up. And we were informed by RAP that Silver Eagle premiums, as of that date, the U.S. Mint made that announcement, so it could change. But the premium they're going to charge is going to be 30% higher than it was before the outage. So this is insane. So even if you want to order an Eagle, you can. It'll be on back order, and B, you're going to have to pay a much higher premium because of it. And this is not a goldsilver.com issue. This is an issue all dealers are going to get charged this higher premium from the APs and from the Mint, and they're going to have to pass that cost on, obviously, because bullion margins are very tight. They're very small. So Eagles are going to be more expensive because the mint was completely unprepared for this little bump in demand that we've seen. So this is concerning. So I think the big issue here is that if we get another bull market,
yeah,
and investors really crowd into silver, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. You're going to be in a situation where the products you may want may not be available. They may be on back order or a delivery delay, and you will definitely pay a higher premium. So that's the issue. So to me, the message here is that you need to buy your silver now while you can still get it, and while the premiums aren't too bad, because I think they're going to be a lot worse. And if you can't get Eagles now, there's lots of other silver products that you can buy.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about limitations or constraints on availability of the inputs, the raw materials that the mint uses to make silver Eagles, because we've had Rob Kirby and others on talking about that there's been a massive accumulation of precious metals by world central banks and dumping it simultaneously of U.S. treasuries. And it just seems like by the time that the U.S. public kind of figures out which way things are going, you don't want to be the last one to that trend. You want to still be able to participate when it's against the tide of the momentum. And it's interesting that even in this moderate demand year that they're planning didn't anticipate, and that it doesn't take much when there's an imbalance in that.
That's the way to put it. It didn't take much to just throw them, out of balance and to the point where they had to shut down production or distribution at least for, at least several weeks. And that's being generous. We are dealing with a government agency here, so who knows how long it could be. But that's a very good point. And a lot of people tell me, by the way, I'll just add this real quick, well, if Mike Maloney is right about deflation coming first and then inflation, if he's right about that, then, well, gold and silver prices are going to crash. I'll just buy it then. Mm-hmm. Well, if you remember what happened in 2008, 2009, that's exactly what happened. Gold and silver prices crashed with the market, and then they started coming back long before the stock market. But while prices were down, demand just shot up because of everything going on in the economy at the time and how, frightened people were. Well, okay, spot prices are a lot lower. I'm going to get a great deal. Well, what people didn't realize is, anticipate is that premiums would skyrocket as well.
Yep.
And so I did a little table in this article that shows you, the premium a year before the crisis and then the month after the crisis started. And premiums went from something like 15% on average to 55% on average. So even though spot was significantly lower, you actually didn't save very much money at all, mm-hmm. and you still couldn't even get the product. So I think that kind of scenario is something that could easily repeat.
Before we let you go, I wanted to give you a chance to tell us about what you spoke about live in Vancouver at the Precious Metals Conference that you spoke at.
That was a fun conference. It was a fun presentation, and it did create a little bit of buzz. I was surprised at the conference there because I really gave a lot of good examples that showed just how small the market was. But the whole first half of the thing is, what do I think the number one reason is that silver is going to skyrocket, and not go into a bull market, but once it's in a bull market, why is the price going to skyrocket? And I asked all these things like, is it rising supply? Is it or falling supply? Excuse me. Is it rising demand? Is it mm-hmm. the use in electronics and all yep. these reasons? And then of course I came out with the number one reason, in my opinion, is that this market is just so small. I mean, just as another example is Berkshire Hathaway has something like $1 billion in cash themselves. Well, they could take 1.5% of their cash and buy every registered ounce of silver stock on the COMEX with 1.5% of their cash. That it's a rounding error. So the number of entities that are out there with hordes of cash that could come into this market and just and begin to take control of it and of course push the price up dramatically mm-hmm. is a little overwhelming to think about. So again, I'm personally betting on it. I think that's what's going to happen. I think some investors out there are going to figure that out. And just like the Hunts, they're going to want to protect themselves from inflation, from crisis, from government spending, government debt, government printing, all these things. And I think that's going to happen again. So that was a fun thing to do. People can see that on the website as well, or just Google it on YouTube, Jeff Clark, the Silver Slamorama. So it was a fun thing to do.
So Jeff, if people want to find out, I mentioned a few articles that you've written recently. If they want to follow your work, where can they keep in plugged in?
It's really easy at goldsilver.com. You'll see the news tab there, and that's where most of my articles appear there, or the blog, including any presentations and interviews like this that we do. We'll have our interview up there as well. So there's lots of good information. If people want to sign up, they can do that and get our information before we actually release it to the public. So if they want to sign up with their email, they can do that and actually get the information first. So yeah.
Anything that I should have asked you about these topics that I failed to, that are still on your mind before we let you go?
I think a lot of people of your audience are probably doing the right thing in preparing for some type of event, or more likely, in my opinion, a series of events. And I do think there's not only going to be another bull market in gold and silver, it's probably going to be one of the bigger ones we've seen in recorded history. And that's a direct relation to the type of crisis that is likely ahead. We have the everything bubble, including debt, and longest economic expansion. So a recession is going to come, and it's going to probably be bigger than usual. And just all the factors that are going on makes me want to be overweight gold and silver at this point in time, and I think it will pay off.
Thanks, Jeff. We've been speaking with Jeff Clark, the Senior Precious Metals Analyst at Gold Silver. Jeff, as always, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Absolutely. Look forward to it again, Dunnigan.
Hey, Reluctant Preppers. If you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.